Everyone been to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 yet? Yes? Good. Fantastic. This video is going to contain a lot of spoilers for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. If you haven't seen it, please go and see the film before viewing this video. If you have seen it, let's get into it. So as I mentioned in my spoiler-free video, there's a lot of development in the relationship between Peter Quill and Ego, the living planet, played by Kurt Russell in this film. They are father and son, and you get that development of why he wasn't around when Peter Quill was a kid. You get that development of what Peter Quill ultimately is as a person, and it turns out, yes, Kurt Russell is Ego, the living planet. He himself is actually a projection of the core of the planet, which is Ego. So yeah, Ego, the living planet, is a big deal. It's not how it was in the comic books, and I think that was a little bit of a bold choice. In the original graphic novels, Peter Quill is the son of Jason of Spartax, who is the king of a planet called Spartax. And that's ultimately it for that plotline. Like, Peter Quill basically ends up being royalty on a different planet. So you can kind of see how that plotline would just kind of end there for the sake of the cinematic universe. But when you introduce the idea of him being the son of a living planet and having celestial blood in him, it makes sense from the perspective of the first film as to why he could hold the Infinity Stone for so long and ultimately not get completely obliterated by it. But they focus a lot on the development of this, and I kind of felt at some points that there was a lot of this father-son bonding moment that I just felt was a little bit misplaced within the confines of the film. At one point I thought they might have it double back on itself, so actually Ego, the living planet, isn't his father and he's just using him because he knows he's very unique in his lineage, and that someone else was going to swoop in and save the day and he was going to be Peter Quill's father, but they actually stuck with that plot line for the whole film. So there was dedication to that choice. But ultimately, I still feel like it was a really bold choice for them to make. Having Yondu at the end kind of fly in and save the day really made that character for me. I felt like up until this point, we'd seen him do some stuff that had helped them out, so he was never really ultimately going to be a bad guy. That bit where he swoops in and saves Peter Quill at the end of the day, that really gave a defining moment to the character for me, and I really enjoyed that. He had a lot of cool moments in this film, where he gets his new fin on his head, because the other one gets blown off of him, and he can now, like, super control his arrow and it's darting all over the place. That gave that character not superpowers, but it gave him more of a reason to join the Guardians, because he can do this really cool stuff. Even for as short a time as it was, be a Guardian of the Galaxy made that character even better for me. And it made his sacrifice at the end that much more meaningful for me. I will go on record as saying I welled up at the end. Definitely welled up at the end. Not as much as I did for Logan. I want to make that very clear right now. Logan is still the comic book movie that I have welled up at the most, but this is getting towards that as well. His line that he had at the end, where he said, "He may have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy." I was like, that's cool. Like, even though he was kind of a dick to Peter Quill when he was growing up, you realise that he was doing it for a reason. He was doing it to toughen him up, and because he wanted him to be a stronger person. For as short as his moments were being a Guardian of the Galaxy, it made it really cool to see that. So I'm glad that they had that in there, and it made him a mega cool character for the film. That being said, after his sacrifice in the film, there was a really long send-off. I kind of felt like I was watching the end of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Even though it was still cool to see all of the other Ravagers turn up that he's worked with, come and pay their respects, I still feel like that went on just a little bit too long, and it kind of lost the effect after a while. Like, keep that little bit shorter and it would have had the full effect for me. Another bold choice that I felt they made in the film, which paid off for the purposes of the film, but still left me thinking, what was that all about, was basically giving Peter Quill superpowers at the end to fight Ego with. I'm still not entirely certain how well that worked. I feel like it had to happen for the purposes of defeating Ego, the living planet, but at the same time, I felt it kind of detracted from what makes Star-Lord what he is. He is good at what he does by being Star-Lord. He's guts, gadgets, and guns. That's Star-Lord. And I felt like giving him superpowers kind of detracted from that a little bit. I would have liked to have seen him work out a way to defeat him without having the superpowers. In a way, yes, they did, because they had Groot with the detonator go down into the core and set it off, because ultimately Baby Groot has to have something to do. I mean, he can't just be cute the whole film. I mean, even though he was cute for the whole film, he still needs to have something to do. Whether that's actually going to be something that pays off later in Avengers Infinity War, and Peter Quill will have the insight as to what it's like having those powers when it comes to fight Thanos, I don't know. That might have been something that will then go and pay off in a later film. But for the purposes of this film, it felt a tad out of place. And yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 2 did suffer a little bit from the same things as a lot of MCU films do, which is they have a bit of a throwaway villain. Now ultimately, Ego was not necessarily so much of a throwaway villain, because it's easily the biggest one physically that we've seen. But it's still, on many other levels, suffered from the throwaway villain syndrome, even with Taserface taking over the Ravagers and putting Rocket Raccoon and Yondu in prison, and then them having to overthrow him in another mutiny kind of style. I felt like that was still a little bit of the throwaway villain syndrome. Like, they're there to serve a purpose, but we're not going to see them again. That's them done with. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of a build-up of something a little bit more long-term, like with Thor and Loki, having a means to an end somewhere further down the line than just the end of this film. It's not that they were suffering from a bad villain. They had a great villain for this film, much like with Ronan in the first film. It's more just a setup for something a little bit more permanent when you know that James Gunn is going to be directing the third one as well. And with James Gunn directing the third one, I'm really excited about that. He basically owns this Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. He has a long-term vision in sight, so I have no doubt that there will be stuff that pays off later on down the line in the third film as well. I'm even more excited that one out of the five post-credit scenes that there are for this film, each of which is brilliant, by the way, the one of them is showing we will finally be getting Adam Warlock in the third Guardians of the Galaxy film. For those of you who don't know who Adam Warlock is, in the comics, he is integral to the Guardians of the Galaxy in defeating Thanos. So hopefully there's going to be something coming into play with him fighting Thanos at some point. I don't know. Either that, or they're going to have him introduced into the Guardians of the Galaxy to defeat something even bigger in the third film. But who knows? All I know is that we're finally getting Adam Warlock in joining the Guardians of the Galaxy, and that is something to get excited about. There is also another tease at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy with Sylvester Stallone and what looks to be like the original Guardians of the Galaxy from way back in the day assembling at the end. So we might see even more of those in the third film as well, but who knows, that might just be something that was a little bit of a tease at the end of this one. So what did you think of the spoiler discussion for Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 2? Obviously you've seen it by this point. If you haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 2 and you've just watched all of this video, congratulations, you've just had the best bit spoiled for you, and I hope you're happy. Let's discuss some of the spoilers in the comments below. As As always, you can also catch my written reviews on letterboxd.com, letterboxd.com. I always go into a little bit more detail in there than I do in the videos, just because I can ramble a little bit. So if you've liked what you've seen here and you want to see some more, hit that like button and subscribe to see some more in the future. And until that point, I will see you next time. Star-Lord.